He looked at me across the kitchen table, and he said the words so calmly, like he was asking what I wanted for dinner. "Pick one," he said. "One kid, Rachel. That's what the lawyer says we can afford to fight over. So pick one and let the other two go with me." I remember the coffee cup in my hand, still warm, and how my fingers went numb around it anyway. 3 children, 10 years of marriage, and Daniel sat there like he was dividing furniture. My name is Rachel Monroe, and I need to tell you what happened the year my husband tried to turn our children into a bargaining chip, and what I found out about him, and about myself, that made me finally stop being afraid. It started on a Tuesday in March, the kind of gray afternoon where nothing feels remarkable until it becomes the day your whole life splits in half. I was folding laundry in the room that used to be my sanctuary, half listening to the television, when Daniel walked in without knocking. Not that he ever needed to. It was still his house too, on paper, and he had that look. That particular look he got before he said something designed to hurt. "We need to talk about the kids," he said. I set down the shirt I was folding. Emma's shirt, actually, pink with a small unicorn on the front, the one she wore even when it didn't match anything, because she loved it too much to care. "Okay," I said carefully. "What about them?" "I talked to my lawyer today." Those 6 words. I'd been hearing them for months, and every time they landed like small stones, one after another, wearing down whatever was left of the ground beneath me. "He says, given the circumstances," Daniel continued, and there was something in his voice I hadn't heard before, something colder, "that we should split things up efficiently. No dragging this out for years. No fighting over every single detail." "Efficiently," I repeated. The word tasted wrong in my mouth. "You take one, I take 2. We settle this like adults." "I want you to understand something before I go further." I had heard, in the weeks before that day, whispers, small comments, the kind of thing you brush off because believing them means your entire foundation crumbles. Friends who'd stopped meeting my eyes. A voicemail I wasn't supposed to hear, deleted too quickly. I hadn't let myself think about what it meant. Not fully. Not yet. But standing there, holding Emma's little shirt, I felt something shift. "You're joking," I said. "Tell me you're joking, Daniel." He wasn't. His face didn't move. 10 years of marriage, and I'd never seen him look at me like I was a problem to be solved rather than a person to be loved. "Which one do you want?" he asked, like he was offering me a choice of paint colors. "Marcus is 12. He's old enough to understand what's happening, might make things easier. Or Emma, she's 7, still young enough to adjust. Or you could take Lily, though, at 4. She'll need the most from you, and given your situation, I'm not sure that's practical." My situation. That's what he called it. 2 years earlier, I'd left my job to care for my mother during her illness, and I hadn't gone back to full-time work since. He knew that. He knew exactly what leverage that gave him. "They're not items on a list, Daniel." My voice cracked, but I kept it steady enough to speak. "There are children, all 3 of them." "I'm being realistic," he said. "You think a judge is going to give full custody of 3 kids to someone who hasn't held a real job in 2 years. I'm trying to help you, Rachel. I'm giving you the chance to walk away with something instead of fighting a battle you'll lose completely." I stood there in the doorway of that laundry room, holding a small pink shirt, and I understood, really understood, for the first time, that the man I had built a life with, the man I had trusted with everything, was capable of using our own children as a chess move. "Why," I asked quietly, "are you doing this?" And that's when he told me, not directly, not with any tenderness in the delivery. He said it the way you'd mention the weather. "There's someone else, Rachel. Her name is Vanessa. And she, well, it's complicated. But she's not interested in inheriting 3 kids that aren't hers. 1, maybe. She said she could manage 1." The room tilted. I actually reached for the dresser to steady myself, and I remember thinking, distantly, how strange it was that my body knew to brace itself before my mind had caught up to the words. He had a girlfriend. He had a girlfriend, and she had opinions about how many of our children she was willing to tolerate, and he was standing in our home negotiating our family down to a number that suited her comfort. "Get out," I said. My voice didn't even sound like mine. "Rachel," Get out of this house, Daniel, now. He left. Of course he left. Men like Daniel always leave when the conversation stops going the way they planned. But before he walked out the door, he turned back, and he said something I will never forget as long as I live. Think about what I offered you, because next time I might not offer at all. I didn't cry that night. I want to tell you that because I think people expect the crying, expect the collapse. But I didn't cry. I sat on the floor of Lily's room while she slept, watching her small chest rise and fall, and I felt something harden inside me instead. Something that had been soft for too long. The weeks that followed were a blur of lawyers' offices with bad lighting and worse coffee, of documents that reduced my children to line items, of Daniel's new attorney, sharp-suited, cold-eyed, using words like custodial burden and financial viability, as though my children were assets on a balance sheet rather than 3 small people who called me mama. Marcus started asking questions I didn't have gentle enough answers for. Is Dad really going to make us live in different houses? Like, not together? He asked me one evening, sitting at the edge of his bed, 12 years old and trying so hard to sound like it didn't scare him. We're going to figure this out, I told him. I promise you we're going to figure this out. But what if he picks Emma and Lily and not me? Because I'm older, and older kids are more trouble, that's what Dad says. Marcus, I sat beside him and took his hand. No one is choosing between you, not while I have anything to say about it. But even as I said it, I didn't fully believe I had the power to stop it. Daniel had the money. Daniel had the lawyer who billed $400 an hour. Daniel had, apparently, a whole new life waiting on the other side of this divorce, clean and uncomplicated, minus whichever children didn't fit into it. Emma, my 7-year-old, stopped sleeping through the night. I'd find her standing in my doorway at 2 a.m, silent, just watching me, like she needed to confirm I was still there before she could let herself sleep again. Bad dream, I'd ask. She'd nod, never elaborate, but I knew the dream was some version of the same fear Marcus had spoken aloud. The fear of being unwanted, of being the one left behind, or the one taken, torn from her siblings by a decision made in a lawyer's office by 2 adults who were supposed to protect her. Lily was too young to understand the words, but she understood the tension. 4-year-olds always do. She clung to me more, cried more easily, asked, "Are you leaving too, Mommy?" in a voice so small it broke something in my chest every single time. I went to see my own lawyer, a woman named Patricia Hale, sharp and no-nonsense, who'd been recommended by a friend from my mother's old support group. I sat across from her desk and told her everything. The affair, the offer, the threat. She listened without interrupting, and when I finished, she set down her pen and looked at me with an expression I hadn't expected, something like quiet anger, banked low and controlled. He said that, in those words, that his girlfriend would only, quote, manage one. Yes. Rachel, I need you to understand something. Custody isn't decided by what's convenient for either parent, or their girlfriend, or anyone else. It's decided by what's best for the children. And a man who negotiates his own children like inventory, that's not a strong position for him, no matter how good his lawyer is. For the first time in weeks, something loosened in my chest. Not hope exactly, not yet, but the first thin thread of it. So what do I do? You fight, she said simply. You fight for all 3, and you let me handle Daniel's lawyer. I wanted to believe it would be that clean. I wanted to believe that decency and fairness would simply win because they were decency and fairness. But I had already learned, in 10 years of marriage, that Daniel didn't play by those rules. He played to win, and he played dirty when he needed to. 3 days later, I found out exactly how dirty. I was going through paperwork in what used to be our shared office, searching for Lily's old medical records for the custody evaluation, when I found a folder I didn't recognize, tucked behind old tax documents, bank statements. Statements from an account I had never seen before, in Daniel's name only, going back almost 2 years. 2 years. The exact length of time since I'd left my job to care for my mother. I sat on the floor of that office with those papers spread around me, And I did the math, slowly, painfully, and I realized that while I had been sitting beside hospital beds, watching my mother fade, Daniel had been quietly building a separate life. Moving money, making plans. He hadn't fallen into an affair. He had constructed an exit brick by brick while I wasn't looking. And that's when I found the second document, the one that made my hands go cold. It was a custody proposal, drafted weeks before he'd ever said a word to me. Weeks before that conversation in the laundry room, and it wasn't asking for 2 of my 3 children. It was asking for all 3. I don't need any tools for this, it's pure narration. Let me continue the story directly. The paper shook in my hands, not from the cold. From something else entirely, a fear so complete it felt physical, like the floor had opened beneath me and I was still falling, still waiting to hit bottom. All 3. He wanted all 3 children. Not 2 like he'd told me in the laundry room. Not the generous offer he'd dressed up as mercy, as though letting me keep 1 child was some kind of gift. The real document, the one he never meant for me to see, laid it out in his lawyer's careful language, sole custody, all 3 minor children, citing my, quote, unstable employment history and prolonged absence from the workforce as grounds. He had planned to take everything. And the conversation in the laundry room, the fake choice, the fake mercy, that had been a rehearsal. A softer version, designed to make me grateful for scraps while he prepared to ask a judge for the whole meal. I don't remember standing up. I don't remember walking to the phone. But I remember Patricia's voice on the other end, steady, asking me to breathe, asking me to read the document to her slowly, word for word. Rachel, she said when I finished, I need you to bring me every page of that folder. Today, this changes everything. How? Because now we know what he's really after. And now we know he lied to you to get you to negotiate against yourself. That matters. That matters a great deal. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in the kitchen with a cup of tea gone cold, staring at the wall, replaying 10 years of my life like a film reel, searching for the moment I had missed. The moment where Daniel had stopped being the boy who used to leave notes in my coat pockets and become a man who drew up custody paperwork behind my back like a business acquisition. I never found that moment. Maybe there wasn't one single moment. Maybe it was 1,000 small ones, each too quiet to notice until they added up to this. The custody evaluation came 2 weeks later. A woman named Diane Rourke, calm and observant, spent an afternoon at the house, watching me with the children, asking Marcus and Emma gentle questions in a separate room while I waited outside, my hands clasped so tightly my knuckles ached. Afterward, Diane sat with me in the living room. Your son, she said, is very protective of his sisters. He mentioned more than once wanting to make sure they, quote, don't get split up. He seems to carry a great deal of worry for someone his age. He's had a lot to worry about, I said quietly. Your daughter Emma drew a picture for me. Want to see it? She handed it to me. 4 stick figures under one roof, holding hands. Above it, in a 7-year-old's careful printing, MY family all together. I had to look away for a moment before I trusted myself to speak. And Lily, Diane continued, is very attached to you. Physically, she doesn't want distance. That's meaningful at her age. What does this mean? I asked. For the case. It means, Diane said, closing her folder, that I'll be recommending the court keep the children together and that you remain their primary caregiver. I can't promise what a judge decides, but my recommendation carries weight. I wanted to cry from relief right there in front of her, but I held it together until she left, and then I sat on my kitchen floor and let it all out, months of terror, finally given somewhere to go. But Daniel wasn't finished. He showed up 2 days before the final hearing, unannounced, standing on my porch in the evening light looking, for just a moment like the man I used to know. Tired, uncertain, almost human again. Can we talk? He asked. I didn't want to let him in, but something in me, maybe the last dying ember of 10 years together, made me step aside. He sat at the kitchen table, the same table where he'd once asked me to choose between our children like items on a menu, and he was quiet for a long moment before he spoke. Vanessa left, he said finally. I said nothing. She said this was too much. The kids, the fighting, the money, she said she signed up for a boyfriend, not 3 children she didn't ask for. He gave a short, humorless laugh. Funny, that's exactly what I asked you to accept, isn't it? Except from her side it looked different. Ugly, even. You wanted all 3 of them, Daniel. Not 2. I found the real proposal. His jaw tightened, but he didn't deny it. I panicked, he said. I thought if I asked for everything, I'd end up with something. It's how negotiation works, Rachel. You push for more than you. They're not a negotiation, I said, and my voice came out low and hard, nothing like the voice that used to soften for him out of habit. They are not leverage. They are not inventory. They are Marcus and Emma and Lily, your children, our children, and you were willing to use them to keep a woman who didn't even want them. He looked down at the table. For the first time since this had all begun, he looked ashamed. I don't know how to fix this, he said quietly. You don't, I told him. Not with me. Maybe someday with them, if you're patient, if you're honest, if you actually show up instead of asking who's convenient enough to keep. But that has nothing to do with me anymore. He left that night without another word. The hearing came on a rain-soaked Thursday morning. I remember the sound of it against the courthouse windows, steady and relentless, while I sat beside Patricia, my hands folded so tightly in my lap they'd gone pale. Daniel's lawyer argued financial capability. Patricia countered with the evaluation, with Diane's testimony, with the drawing Emma had made all together, under one roof, presented not as evidence exactly, but as a window into what these children needed most. The judge, a woman with silver hair and tired, careful eyes, took almost no time deliberating once both sides had spoken. This court finds that the best interest of the children is served by keeping the siblings together, she said, and by maintaining Mrs. Monroe as primary custodial parent, given the strength of the bond documented by the evaluator, and given serious concerns raised regarding the father's proposed division of custody based on convenience rather than the children's welfare. I don't remember breathing again until Patricia squeezed my hand under the table. We won, not because I had more money or a sharper lawyer or some clever trick. We won because 3 children had drawn a picture, asked worried questions, and held on to each other tightly enough that even strangers in a courtroom could see what mattered. That evening, I picked up all 3 of them from my sister's house, where they'd stayed during the hearing. Marcus ran to me first, faster than a 12-year-old should probably admit to running, and wrapped his arms around me without a word. Emma followed, her small hand finding mine, gripping tight. And Lily just reached up to be carried, the way she always did, like the safest place in the world was still my arms. Are we going home? Marcus asked. All of us together. All of us, I said, together always. In the weeks that followed, Daniel came around, slowly, carefully, on the terms the court had set, with supervised visits that gradually became less supervised as trust, thin and fragile, began rebuilding itself. I won't pretend it was easy watching him with them, knowing what he'd been willing to do. But I also watched him try, in small ways, to become someone his children could rely on again. And I let that happen, because their relationship with him was theirs to rebuild, not mine to destroy out of anger. As for me, I went back to work slowly at first, then with growing confidence, taking a job at a nonprofit that helped women navigating custody battles just like mine. I understood now, in a way I never had before, what it meant to sit across from someone and tell them, your children are not a bargaining chip. Not for anyone. Not ever. Some nights, when the house is quiet and all 3 of them are finally asleep, I stand in the hallway and listen to their breathing through the cracked doors Marcus, who still checks on his sisters before he goes to bed. Emma, who sleeps soundly now, no more 2 a.m. visits to my doorway. Lily, who still reaches for me first thing every morning just to make sure I'm there. And I remember that day in the laundry room, holding her little pink shirt, when Daniel asked me to choose. I remember the coldness in his voice, the calculation in his eyes, like our family was something that could be divided and reduced to fit someone else's comfort. He was wrong. He was wrong about all of it. Because love isn't something you ration out to make room for someone new. And children aren't chosen, they're kept, all of them, with everything you have, no matter what it costs you to hold on. I chose all three. I always would have. And in the end, that choice was the only one that ever really mattered.